My name's Stephen Lugg. As has already been said, I'm the Chief Exec of a small association of actually the 262 parish and town councils across Hampshire. Powerful community network. I'm also at home, I live in Dorset, a member of a local authority, and I was on an audit and scrutiny committee last night, and I was begging the chair actually, and the rest of the committee, to think about focusing on outcomes rather than being excited about the lovely processes, because local authorities love process. Outcomes, it's a whole new world for them. And the problem is, as a customer paying tax, I'm interested in those positive outcomes. I don't actually give a damn about the processes. And although legal compliance is important, we need our politicians to be brave and imaginative. And I love the example about local authorities being able to set up as banks in that narrow sense that was just outlined. That's really exciting and actually really important for people to pick up on, but whether they will or not is another matter. I don't know whether I'm a realist or a cynic. So I've only got a few minutes, and I'll try and whiz through localism and some of the constraints, some of the opportunities. One of the things that I really learned in the military, which applies to local authorities, that tomorrow's battles can still be won with yesterday's ideas, but the collateral needed is really, really high. Obviously, that's in human lives in the army, but for local authorities, when resources are scarce, we really got to understand that the financial cuts, bringing it to a micro level in Hampshire, are going to bring local authorities to their knees unless we change the structure of local government to be appropriate for the money, the resources that we have coming in, and for the needs of people, because that's what we're there for. So you look at party politics, not 1 in 70 people in this country is interested in being a member of a political party, and yet the big politicians still lumbering around like brontosauruses. They're just waiting for that meteorite. That's a dodgy thing to say as a party politician, isn't it? It's okay, I'm here as an officer today, so apolitical. So the political context for localism. We've got a serious and massive agenda, and all three main parties, and apologies to the smaller ones, but I'll use that term, signed up to localism, in theory. So the real cross-party support. So you remember double devolution to big society, which is heading the same way. Lovely terms, doesn't mean anything to anyone in real life, but terms that effectively are allied to localism. The Localism Act that came out with much trumpeting from Mr. Pickles from sort of 2010 onwards until it finally was signed off by the Queen in November 2011, and we still see its implementation coming through now. It's clear it does have ministerial support, although you may not notice it in a coherent way. I was listening to Oliver Letwin, who is the Government Minister for Policy 2 weeks ago, and he was quite clear that it's not the government's job to get localism out to you and I, as taxpayers. They are giving local authority the tools to do it, in their view. And it's up to local authorities to pass that on to communities. Quite clear about that, and I didn't actually realise that before. That was quite a light bulb moment for me. But most local authorities, I'm not criticising Hampshire County Council at all, but Hampshire County Council have just lost 2,000 employees, so they can't keep on working in the same way. And when you're in such a crisis, it's very hard to think strategically, particularly about future battles which you've never even considered before. So there's a real pragmatic problem for local authorities. And that goes back to me challenging local authorities that we need more brave, exciting, imaginative councillors that are actually taking risk. And risk and local authorities doesn't go well together, does it? Also, within the political context, we've got the Open Public Services White Paper. Well, it's a year old now and nothing's happening with it. Certainly on the surface, so we should see, and the Sustainable Communities Act. I'll move on. Within the Localism Act itself, lots of aspects that actually won't necessarily, for pragmatic reasons again, be liked by local authorities. The community infrastructure levy, there's something that is, and I use it as a Hampshire level, is worrying the county council. If you have to build a big development, and you've got to put a new school in, and then the infrastructure levy regulations say that perhaps 25% of this will go to the local council, the parish council or the town council with a neighbourhood plan. So same pot of money, not going to get any more money, but 25% of that has gone to the parish council, and they might, horror of horrors, might want to put a swing park in rather than the school. You've got to go and have a negotiation with them. So it's giving leverage to local people, but on a strategic level, causing real problems. The general power of competence, I'll talk more about in a minute. The community rights that really on a micro level here in Hampshire are still being understood, let alone acted upon. And neighbourhood planning, which is very powerful, but again, very difficult at the moment, where you've got local authorities cutting their staffing in planning departments for good reason, they haven't got the money, but at the same time being expected to support communities in building their own micro plans around how their neighbourhood should look for the next 20 years. So there's massive issues and complications, as there is in everything in life today. Jerry Stoker, I'm pleased with the association with the University of Southampton. Jerry Stoker is our president. He's a great guy. He makes complicated things sound easy to someone like me who's not very bright. He spoke at our AGM in October and was talking about the shininess of the localism if you looked at it on top, but as soon as you got underneath the covers and started trying to do anything with it, the poorly worded legislation, his words, not mine, and the lack of understanding by civil servants when drafting it mean that actually it's very difficult to do much with many of the aspects of it that Mr. Pickles has been telling us that are so brilliant. I mentioned Oliver Letwin before, so I won't mention him again. But the real difficulties, as I've mentioned, turning this policy, which is well meant, of course it is. Not many politicians go into politics, neither do officers, to actually, create problems in society and cause issues for their residents. Talking about, particularly on a micro level for us as parish councils who actually are becoming mainstream local government because of devolution of services and facilities, Eastleigh a shining light in that in terms of the way they've devolved most of their green and open space and yet not run away from their parish councils. They've worked with them to make these spaces both cost and time efficient in terms of the way they're delivered and supported for residents. And yet government, who's telling us about localism, is through the localisation of council tax benefits, through the threat of parish capping probably next year. Mr. Pickles appears more and more centralist to those of us who are actually involved in the sector. And I mentioned the British Army dichotomy, so I won't go back there again. Most importantly, me standing here, the general power of competence. Local authorities got the power of well-being back in 2000, which effectively meant that any local authority could do whatever an individual could do within our laws within this country. So if you think about Eastleigh, simply because my landlord are Eastleigh, so I'm always thinking about them, the Rose Bowl, their involvement in the Rose Bowl, different to what you might think that local authorities get involved in. But actually, it's that imagination, that business thinking that we need right now to support our residents with the things that are really critical to them. Because some of the stuff at local authorities doesn't feel very relevant to residents. And actually, if they can't even access their money cheaply when they're in difficult times, they don't care about anything else. And why should they? And so why are we expecting to go and vote for any of them? If we could find a politician that was with a surname none of the above, then he would be the leader for 2015. It wasn't actually a joke. But the general power of competence is a really, really powerful thing. Whether we're talking about my area and parish councils for local authorities generally, power of first resort. You can actually act on the things that are most important to your residents. There's a shock. It frees you up to work towards local priorities. There are constraints, and all local authorities have to work transparently and be accountable, clearly, with the issues around MPs and their expenses and the way that media in the last 10 years have tended to portray very poorly local authorities and quite often completely wrongly. It means that there is a rebuilding job to be done. But this investment set up in grant funding businesses, and particularly SMEs, where up to 89% in Hampshire of businesses are those small businesses that actually employ people, because a lot of the big ones don't. They're very automated. So our future is in SMEs. That's why I'm excited by this community bank, aside from the benefits for residents as well. I've said most of this on this slide, and I'm keeping it short because I'm aware of the times, and I think discussion aspects will be really useful. But this extra leverage through localism, the financial and the brokering, really, really important. But it does require the hardest thing of all, which is a change of culture, changing individuals' thinking, changing thinking within the party political spectrum, particularly at a local level where actually your residents are the most important thing, is what we need. Some of the conditions for success, well, I keep banging on about that imagination and the bravery to go and do something different, but we do need a better understanding by government. Not necessarily the government themselves, but civil servants who quite often are brilliant at that process, again, without understanding outcomes or even thinking or working towards outcomes. Development. I'm really keen on development because there are a lot of councillors who have an awful lot of experience. They're just taken from society like we all are. But you don't know what you don't know. And I think, therefore, if you haven't got a brain that wants to learn, wants to find out what's really important, what your community thinks, how you're going to do it, then it's very difficult in such a difficult time to be successful. I'll go back to, I've deliberately gone on to the last slide so that you can note my details down, but I want to go back to what I was saying on the last slide, is that we need to concentrate on the younger demographic. Most people under 40 don't write letters anymore. Young people are actually stopping emailing because it's too slow. So social media and this engagement and understanding what young people want is a really important facet of this. And I think that can link in with how we provide banking services for people in the future. It's something we need to think about. Most politicians still are struggling with social media. I just wanted to put that thought in there as well. I could bang on about this all day, but I only had 10 minutes. Think about the general power of competence. It's only as limited as your imagination. Details are on the slide there, and I'm going to leave it up for the next speaker so that they can struggle with it as I did when I arrived. Sorry, I'm just teasing you. And I'll leave you with that thought. But I'm really, really happy to have a further conversation about this with anyone who's interested. Thank you very much.